Do you believe you have control over what you want most? That the sources of your pleasure are conscious choices, aligned with your true essence? What if I told you that, right now, your mind is being played like a piece on an invisible board, where pleasure is just another method of manipulation? What we call pleasure is much darker than we have been taught to believe. It's a psychological maze that traps your mind in an eternal cycle of dissatisfaction. You know the feeling well, always seeking more, never truly satisfied. Carl Jung revealed that what appears to be the ultimate source of happiness may, in reality, be your greatest mental prison. And I ask you, do you really understand what is at stake when you seek pleasure? Or are you just unconsciously obeying hidden commands implanted within your own mind? You will now be taken on a philosophical and psychological journey that will completely change your perception of pleasure, control, and yourself. An uncomfortable journey, I admit, because it will challenge everything you think you know about happiness. But you're here for a reason. Something in you already suspects all this. Something inside you is already restless, seeking release. This is an invitation to a mental revolution, capable of undoing psychological chains that you may not even know exist. Pleasure doesn't have to cease to exist, but your relationship with it can become infinitely more conscious. At the end of this journey, you may discover something few people truly understand: how to take true control of your own mind, instead of simply reacting to your immediate needs. The proposal here is not destruction, but awakening. The conscious liberation from a cycle that seems harmless, but which may be silently shaping your entire life trajectory without you even realizing it. Carl Jung said that there is no freedom without first being aware of what imprisons us. That's what's at stake here. Discovering what's hidden behind your everyday pleasures. A subtle discovery, yet profound enough to change the way you see yourself and the world around you. I clearly remember a day that completely changed my relationship with pleasure. An ordinary day, the kind that goes unnoticed by most. But for me, it was like a psychological turning point. I had just come out of a difficult phase in my life. Intense work, family problems, troubled relationships, all piled up to an almost unbearable point. My only refuge was immediate pleasure: food, social media, superficial distractions. I genuinely believed I deserved these small rewards to ease my mind. That afternoon, after hours of trying to forget my problems, I decided to go for a walk. Without direction, I simply wanted to escape that suffocating feeling inside me. With each step, it seemed like my mind kept returning to the same thought patterns: worries, unfulfilled desires, accumulated frustrations. Then, almost without understanding, I entered a small bookstore, one of those very old ones, smelling of aged pages. I walked through the aisles without paying much attention, until my eyes fell on a dark-covered book, already worn by time. It was a collection of writings by Carl Jung. At the time, I had no idea that this seemingly accidental encounter would forever change the way I saw the world. I opened the book at random, and a sentence immediately jumped out at me, as if it had been written exclusively for me. What you resist persists. What you accept can be transformed. That hit me hard. How could anyone describe exactly what I was experiencing in so few words? The more I resisted the pain, the more intensely I sought immediate pleasures to numb my anguish. The more I avoided facing what was truly wrong, the deeper I sank into a silent spiral of anxiety and dissatisfaction. The perception of pleasure as an escape, rather than something genuinely liberating, shook my mental structure. I began to realize that all that incessant pursuit of small pleasures wasn't really a conscious choice, but a repetitive, automatic pattern. Something that kept me in exactly the same place, without ever resolving what was truly holding me back. You've probably experienced this, that fleeting pleasure that seems helpful at first, but always leaves you with the bitter feeling that something important is being overlooked. That immediate reward that brings temporary relief, but ultimately solves absolutely nothing. And here's the crux of the story. What I considered pleasure was actually a silent, disguised form of self-sabotage. Carl Jung describes this precisely when he says that there is no true transformation without first recognizing the prisons our mind silently builds around us. Invisible prisons, disguised as small moments of pleasure, that create the illusion of freedom while taking us further and further away from true personal fulfillment. From that day on, I began to deeply question every impulse, every desire, every moment of immediate pleasure. Not to eliminate them completely, but to understand the real need behind that relentless pursuit. The deeper I delved, the more I realized something disconcerting. Most of my daily pleasures weren't meant to truly satisfy me, but rather to distract me from the pains and challenges I avoided facing. Perhaps you've felt something similar yourself. A strange feeling of emptiness after what should have been genuine pleasure. A happy moment that, for some reason, doesn't fill the void you hoped it would. This is exactly where your journey can begin. Not to eliminate pleasure, but to rediscover it in its most authentic form, free from the psychological traps that unconsciously sabotage us every day. This video isn't just a philosophical reflection. It's an opportunity to look directly into the eyes of what you might be avoiding. And in doing so, finally realize what Jung calls liberation through awareness. If you feel this reflection has touched a chord within you, please like this video as a powerful way to reaffirm to yourself that you want to see beyond the surface. And subscribe, because true transformation comes from committing to your own psychological awakening. With this, we can move forward together to understand how unconscious pleasure can silently shape your life. Pleasure, according to Jung, is much more than just a natural reaction of the brain or a simple reward mechanism. The true essence behind it is something much more complex, profound, and often overlooked. To fully understand this, we must first look within ourselves with a sincerity that is almost disturbing. What are you really seeking when you seek immediate pleasure? Relief, happiness, or simply an escape from what you can't bear to face? You may not yet be fully aware of it, but there's a hidden logic behind these small daily rewards, a dynamic that silently moves your life, shaping your behaviors, decisions, and even your personality, without you even being fully aware of it. Carl Jung called this the shadow. Not an ordinary shadow, but something deeper, something hidden in the most inaccessible parts of our consciousness. The shadow represents everything you don't accept in yourself. Your pain, fears, insecurities, repressed desires, and deepest anxieties. It's everything you avoid facing directly. And here comes a fundamental revelation. The more you ignore or repress this shadow, the stronger it becomes, silently controlling your life through repetitive behaviors and superficial pleasures. Those small, seemingly innocent moments become tools of self-sabotage, keeping you stuck exactly where you are, preventing you from growing or evolving. Jung suggested that true awareness of pleasure is only possible when we are willing to confront the shadow directly. When we stop seeking only what is easy or immediately pleasurable and begin to accept the uncomfortable truths that live within us. Look, this isn't about demonizing pleasure. Quite the opposite. The point is to understand why certain pleasures never fully satisfy. Why, even after fulfilling desires, is there still a disturbing emptiness inside? The philosophical answer is powerful. Superficial pleasure will never be able to fill the gaps in your true identity. These gaps are precisely the space occupied by the shadow, the repressed and unconscious part of your mind. When pleasure is used as an escape, it becomes a vicious cycle. And this cycle perpetuates the very thing you want to avoid. The more superficial pleasure you seek, the more numb you become, unable to face what truly needs to be transformed within yourself. But Jung offers an extraordinary possibility for change. He invites us to face head-on what we've always ignored, not to intensify our pain, but to deeply understand what's really happening to us. By confronting the shadow, by recognizing what bothers us, we gain power over our own minds. Not superficial power, but something much more significant and liberating. Conscious mastery over our desires and decisions. This is the most philosophical and powerful point Jung offers us. To achieve true freedom and fulfillment, we need to delve deeply into the unconscious, understand our shadows, and stop using pleasure as an anesthetic for our deepest pains. But there's a crucial caveat here. Facing this shadow isn't simple or comfortable. It's a process of psychological confrontation, an intense philosophical journey that requires real courage. That's why most people never take this path. That's why they remain trapped in endless cycles of seeking pleasures that never fully satisfy. But by being here, you are already taking an important step towards breaking this cycle. What follows is a deep dive into concepts and revelations that can definitively redefine your relationship with pleasure. Not only to better understand your mind, but to finally take conscious control over it. Carl Jung was right when he said that we cannot transform what we do not fully acknowledge. But once this shadow is understood, transformation is inevitable. And when that realization comes, don't be surprised if you realize that your old way of seeking pleasure simply doesn't make any sense anymore. Carl Jung wasn't alone in pointing out the complexity of the pursuit of pleasure. Numerous thinkers and philosophers throughout history have profoundly questioned our relationship with what we consider satisfying and pleasurable. Sigmund Freud, a contemporary of Jung and considered the father of psychoanalysis, also understood pleasure as something more complicated than simple stimulus and reward. Freud argued that much of what we call pleasure is intimately linked to the unconscious quest to avoid pain. For Freud, our unconscious doesn't necessarily seek complete happiness, but rather the minimization of anguish. Pleasure, in this view, is merely a temporary escape from our existential pains, not a true resolution of them. This idea directly complements Jung's thinking, as it reveals that many of the pleasures we seek are illusions carefully created by our own minds to avoid what truly torments us. Philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer was even more incisive on the subject. He argued that human beings are driven by a constant and insatiable desire, an endless quest for something that can never truly be achieved. Schopenhauer called this the will to live, an incessant desire that is never fully satisfied, generating endless cycles of pleasure and pain. For him, every pleasure obtained is ephemeral, always replaced by a new desire, a new will. Pleasure, in this philosophical view, becomes a dangerous illusion, something that keeps the individual trapped in an endless race, unable to achieve true existential satisfaction. Nietzsche, another revolutionary thinker, also profoundly questioned our relationship with pleasure. He argued that what we consider pleasurable often weakens rather than strengthens us. Nietzsche called the last man the individual who seeks only immediate comfort, avoiding any suffering or challenge. This person would be condemned to a superficial, anesthetized existence devoid of any real meaning. Pleasure, therefore, in Nietzsche's view, needs to be redefined. It must be a profound pleasure, the fruit of consciously overcoming internal challenges, and not merely an immediate stimulus that numbs existential pain. Nietzsche believed that true personal fulfillment requires consciously facing difficulties, something far removed from the superficial pursuit of comfort that characterizes modern life. Recent neuroscience studies show that the human brain is not designed to live in constant, immediate pleasure. The continuous and excessive release of dopamine, the pleasure neurotransmitter, ends up desensitizing our nervous system, causing us to seek ever-increasing doses of pleasure to achieve the same initial level of satisfaction. In practice, this means that our minds are biologically wired to reject continuous and superficial pleasures. The more immediate pleasure we seek, the harder it is to feel genuine satisfaction, leading us to vicious cycles of anxiety, depression, and chronic dissatisfaction. These studies confirm what Jung and other thinkers had already intuitively realized. Superficial and constant pleasure is not natural to our minds, much less healthy or liberating. Once again, we have clear proof of what Jung called the mental prison of unconscious pleasure. The more we seek immediate pleasure, the further we are from true existential fulfillment. Understanding this is valuable inner knowledge, something most people are unaware of or ignore, continuing to live trapped in repetitive and frustrating cycles. This insight has the potential to radically change your life, provided you deeply understand this dynamic and begin to act differently about your own pursuits of pleasure. But this realization raises another intriguing question. Is there a concrete, real, and philosophical way to definitively break this cycle of superficial pleasure, regaining absolute control and mastery of your mind? This is precisely the idea that Carl Jung encourages us to deeply investigate. And the answer to this question can reveal a new psychological dimension, capable of completely changing the meaning of what you understand by pleasure, freedom, and personal control. Before directly addressing how we can achieve this transformation, we need to explore an even more curious and disturbing dimension about the pursuit of unconscious pleasure. Something you may never have thought about before, but which is closely linked to the social dynamics we currently experience. Something Jung called the collective unconscious, a silent force that directly influences the choices you believe you make alone, especially when it comes to pleasure. When you finally understand it, you will begin to understand not only your personal pleasure, but how the whole society can be silently trapped in this same mental trap. There's something deeply disturbing behind your daily pursuit of pleasure, something Carl Jung explored with surprising intensity and clarity, something almost no one fully understands, but which influences every decision you believe you make alone. Have you ever wondered why certain things become pleasurable to you, even without you consciously deciding to enjoy them? Why do some rewards seem natural and irresistible, while others simply don't grab your attention? Jung brought a disturbing answer to this question, revealing that much of our preferences and pleasures do not come directly from ourselves, but are shaped by something much larger and more invisible: the so-called collective unconscious. The collective unconscious is a deeper layer of the human mind, shared by all humanity. It is made up of symbolic patterns, deep emotions, ancestral fears, and hidden desires that we have culturally inherited, often without realizing it. This collective unconscious acts silently, guiding our most intimate decisions, especially those linked to pleasure and emotional reward. But to what extent do you actually choose the pleasures you seek? To what extent do you have control over what awakens satisfaction in your mind? The answer may be more uncomfortable than you think. According to Jung, we often seek pleasures not because they truly satisfy us, but because they align with collective patterns that make us feel like we belong to something greater. In other words, your unconscious mind chooses certain pleasures simply because they help you fit into a silent, almost invisible social pattern. But the most intriguing thing about all this is that you've probably never even realized this hidden influence. You genuinely believe your choices are yours alone, when in reality, many of them are a direct result of this unconscious collective force that Jung identified almost a century ago. The pursuit of pleasure, viewed from this profound philosophical perspective, ceases to be an exclusively personal matter and becomes a subtle, powerful, and invisible social dynamic. A hidden force that silently controls millions of people, shaping behaviors, desires, and even identities. Now comes the most intriguing and disturbing point of this reflection. If much of what you consider pleasurable doesn't actually come from your conscious will, how can you free yourself from this influence? Is there a practical, real, and possible way to regain control over your own mind and the pleasures that truly make sense to you? The answer to this question can profoundly change your life, not only because of its philosophical impact, but also because it provides a practical key that few people possess. How exactly does the collective unconscious act on you every day? This is the central piece that's still missing, and without it, all this reflection remains incomplete, thought-provoking, but still insufficient for true psychological transformation. When you finally understand the unconscious dynamics that guide your everyday pleasures, something powerful begins to happen within your mind. It's not an instantaneous, radical transformation, but a profound and sustained shift in how you perceive yourself and relate to the world around you. Carl Jung asserted that all true transformation begins with a simple act of awareness. It's not necessary to destroy pleasure itself, but rather to illuminate the psychological darkness surrounding it. When you clearly see the reasons behind your unconscious choices, you regain something extremely valuable: conscious control of your mind. This mastery isn't something superficial or fleeting. It's something profound, directly reflected in your self-esteem, self-confidence, and overall sense of control over your life. From this point on, you stop reacting automatically to external or internal stimuli and start acting consciously based on your own decisions. One of the greatest psychological benefits of this change is breaking destructive patterns of self-sabotage. By stopping seeking pleasure as a mere escape, you begin to confront what truly needs to be resolved within yourself. And by facing these issues directly, you realize something revealing. Your anxiety decreases significantly, as there's no longer a need to numb or avoid what was hidden. Do you remember the personal story I shared earlier? That day, I walked into a small bookstore and stumbled upon Carl Jung's words that made me see pleasure as an unconscious form of escape. That moment was precisely the beginning of this psychological transformation for me. From that day on, I began to consciously observe my choices. I became acutely aware that whenever I sought immediate rewards, something deeper was being overlooked. By confronting these issues, something extraordinary began to happen. Everyday pleasures became more genuine, more satisfying, because they were now the result of conscious choices, not just automatic reactions to pain or anxiety. What seemed small, trivial, and even useless became a powerful psychological benefit, a real sense of existential autonomy. This autonomy is extremely rare in today's society, where we are constantly encouraged to react automatically to superficial and immediate desires. By regaining this conscious mastery over your mind, you stop being silently tossed around by unconscious forces and begin to take center stage in your life. A life guided not just by superficial pleasures, but by the conscious and profound pursuit of true personal fulfillment. Another significant benefit is the improvement in the quality of your relationships. The less you use immediate pleasures as an escape, the more you're able to address interpersonal issues directly, strengthening genuine, honest, and meaningful connections. Furthermore, your mental energy begins to be used much more efficiently. Without constantly wasting it on vicious cycles of pleasure and dissatisfaction, you experience a mental clarity you haven't experienced in a long time. You think better, act better, and naturally feel more aligned with your true identity. This psychological state, the result of a deep awareness of the unconscious search for pleasure, represents a huge step forward in your life, as it opens space for something essential: true personal fulfillment. But the true beauty of this psychological shift is that it doesn't exclude pleasure. Quite the opposite. By becoming aware of unconscious patterns, you finally experience pleasure in its purest, most authentic form. You no longer seek pleasure as an escape, but as a conscious complement to a life already full of meaning. And here, something even more intriguing and profound emerges. This philosophical path proposed by Carl Jung can lead you to discover an even deeper layer of your own consciousness, a dimension that few people have the courage or opportunity to reach. But what exactly is this dimension? How can you access it? And, most importantly, how can this new perception of pleasure and consciousness radically change your existential experience? Your idea of pleasure will never be the same again, because now I will reveal exactly what this great insight proposed by Jung is, and it can completely transform the way you seek and experience pleasure in your life. What Jung really wanted to show is that pleasure in its unconscious form is not just a reward or immediate gratification, but rather a deeply complex psychological escape mechanism. A mechanism your mind silently uses to keep you protected from existential anxieties you don't want or can't face. Behind every superficial pursuit of pleasure, there's always an unconscious shadow wanting to reveal itself. There's always something deeper demanding attention and transformation. Immediate pleasure is, therefore, just a mask, a temporary anesthesia against the discomfort your deeper consciousness constantly tries to reveal to you. But, after all, what is the great solution to break this repetitive and unsatisfactory cycle? Jung's answer is as simple as it is powerful. Bring awareness to your choices and directly confront what you most fear or reject in yourself. True satisfaction lies not in escaping existential pain through superficial pleasure, but in understanding the true source of your discomfort, consciously embracing it, and ultimately transforming it. When you stop seeking pleasure as an anesthetic, a radical shift will occur in your mind. You will stop acting automatically under the influence of the collective unconscious and begin to consciously choose what truly brings meaning to your life. And this deep meaning is the only true source of authentic and lasting pleasure. Carl Jung clearly defined the path. He who looks outside dreams. He who looks inside awakens. This conscious awakening is the true promise this video has sought to deliver from the beginning. Not the destruction of pleasure itself, but the radical transformation of your relationship with it, making it more conscious, deeper, and infinitely more satisfying. From this moment on, whenever you feel that automatic impulse for immediate pleasure, ask yourself first, what am I trying to avoid with this? This simple question will open powerful psychological doors. Doors that will lead you directly to the core of your true inner freedom. The more you become aware of these unconscious impulses, the more you will regain true control of your life. This is the central point of the profound reflection that Jung offers us on pleasure and consciousness. You'll never find true satisfaction while trapped in unconscious cycles of automatic pleasure. But the moment you bring awareness to your choices, all pleasure will take on a radically different meaning. It will be the fruit of your freedom, no longer a mental prison. Now you hold a valuable psychological key in your hands, a key that can lead you to a much more authentic, profound, and satisfying life. Carl Jung's insights into pleasure don't simply end here. They open the door to a continuous path of self-discovery and psychological growth. There's no end point to this journey, as consciousness never stops expanding when you remain awake. Perhaps you're already noticing subtle changes in how you observe your desires and impulses. Perhaps this awareness has already begun to influence your choices, allowing you to gradually become freer and more aware of your deepest decisions. But, after all, what is the next step on this journey? It's impossible to answer this question completely, as only you can discover where your consciousness will take you from now on. Each person will find different answers, unique paths that depend directly on how willing they are to confront their inner shadow. Remember that Jung clearly said, "The shadow is what a person does not want to be." However, it is exactly what needs to be faced so that we can grow. It is precisely in the shadow that the answers to your deepest questions about yourself lie. It is in the shadow that the root of unconscious pleasures lies, but it is also there that the key to your psychological awakening lies. This journey won't necessarily be easy, but it will be extraordinarily rewarding. You're no longer trapped in the illusion of superficial pleasure. From now on, every experience can become conscious and meaningful. Every desire can be observed with deep curiosity and understanding. Your life thus gains an unprecedented philosophical dimension, a dimension in which pleasure is genuine because it is aligned with who you truly are, not with what the collective unconscious dictates you to be. True inner freedom begins here, at this very point of consciousness you have just reached. The great mystery that remains is this: how far will you be able to go, now that you know this profound truth about pleasure? Only you can give that answer. This video concludes your initial journey, but it's not the end of your transformation. It will continue daily, whenever you allow yourself to reflect on the true meaning behind your choices and deepest desires. Watch this video as many times as you need. And always remember this phrase from Jung: "I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become." Now, with all this awakened consciousness, it is your time to choose who you really want to be. Now, 2 videos are appearing on your screen. Think about the next move with strategy, but also follow your intuition, choose one of them, and continue this journey on the board of your mind. After all, if you control your mind, you can control the game. I'll see you there.